Yuji Itadori's greatest strength might also be the very thing that's destroying him. He's caring, he's resilient, and he's someone who refuses to back down. So of course he's easy to admire because his heart is almost impossible not to love. In many ways, he's even someone we aspire to be like. But at the same time, he's also stubborn, self-sacrificing, and carries burdens that were never meant to be his, even if it's to his own detriment. And sure, that can seem honorable, but what if I told you that the most damaging thing you can do for yourself and everyone around you is to give and give until there's nothing left of you? That's how having a good heart can become a prison, because in the moment we believe that what we're doing is the right thing. We believe giving endlessly is for the greater good of everyone else. But just because you have love to give, that doesn't mean your love doesn't need discernment. Which is why this is something I want to help you recognize before it costs you more years of your time and energy. But first, you must be willing to face the parts of you that keep confusing self-sacrifice with love. I'm Justin Trinity, and welcome to Midnight Sanctuary, a home created for who we are and who we're becoming. Now let's continue. Like many of us, Yuji begins as someone who is living a relatively normal life. He goes to school, jokes with his friends, and experiences the world with a sense of innocence that he doesn't even realize he's about to lose. At the time we're introduced to him, his bedridden grandfather was his only present caregiver and the closest thing Yuji had to home. All of this seemed pretty standard until his grandfather left him with these final words before passing.
Yuji? You're a strong kid, so try to help others. Save the people you can, even if it's only those closest to you. When you die, you should be surrounded by people. Don't end up like me.
Now, what people don't know is that when something intense or traumatic happens, we don't just remember the event. We often create a story of meaning from it which has the power to change the trajectory of our entire lives. In our minds, these stories could sound something like, if I don't live up to everyone's expectations, I'm a failure. Or, I have to take care of everyone else no matter what it costs me. But these stories become dangerous when we turn them into permanent rules for who we're allowed to be. In Yuji's case, his grandfather's final words were something that instilled a sense of purpose. They gave him a standard to live up to. And while having a purpose is something many people wish for, what we don't always realize is that even purpose can become dangerous when it leads us to abandoning ourselves. We see this manifest immediately the moment his friends and Megumin were faced with a life or death situation. This leads to Yuji swallowing Sukuna's finger regardless of the terrible consequences it could have on him. This moment mirrors a belief that many people share, which is, it doesn't matter what happens to me as long as everyone else is okay. And this is how the invisible prison begins. This is how we start to believe that the world requires us to sacrifice ourselves for the greater good. It took me many years to come to this realization, and that realization is that not everyone who comes to you is coming for you. Meaning some people are attracted to your heart, and it's not because they want to love it, but instead because they know how much they could benefit from it. They've probably picked up on the fact that you're someone who genuinely wants to see the people around you win. They may have noticed you forgive quickly, you show up consistently, you care deeply, you overextend, and that you feel guilty for saying no. And then what happens is that some people begin treating your kindness as access points for what they can receive from you. So the sad truth is that not everyone wants you to win as much as you want them to win. And the reason this is so hard to escape is that there's a part of you that believes that saying no makes you selfish. In Yuji's case, the irony is that the same sacrificial choice he made to save people is the exact thing that allowed Jujutsu society to turn him into a means to an end. His body became useful for what it could contain, and if he objected, then the consequence would be death. But for us, ordinary civilians who don't have the privilege of fighting cursed spirits for a living, thank God, this teaches us that when you have a good heart without boundaries, people may start to value you more for what you can do than who you actually are. And this mental prison only becomes stronger the more the world rewards you for sacrificing yourself. So why do we continue sacrificing ourselves and overgiving even after we realize that it's hurting us?
What I thought was my conviction was just an excuse I made for myself.
Now, throughout my life, I've always been someone who genuinely wanted to see people win. I wasn't just trying to please people. I wanted to share anything and everything I possibly could, especially if I thought that it could help them succeed. So in a sense, uplifting people provided me a sense of purpose. But over time, I realized two things. The first is that there's a difference between supporting someone's potential and overinvesting in a life they're not willing to choose for themselves. I realized that not every person I was pouring into had the desire, the capacity, or responsibility to receive what I was actually giving. I realized that you could support someone's path, but you cannot walk it for them. Some people want advice, but not accountability. They want your energy, but not your standards. They want access to your wisdom, but not the responsibility that comes with applying it. And once I realized that, it brought me to the second pattern I saw. Because the issue wasn't that certain people couldn't receive what I was giving. The deeper issue was that I kept giving anyways, even when it wasn't being valued. Even when it was pulling time, energy, and focus from the life I said I wanted to build. That forced me to ask a difficult question. Was I really helping, or was I using that as an excuse to avoid fully choosing myself? I was essentially avoiding the effort my own vision required. I was basically doing the same thing they were, but in my own way. How ironic. But it's not our responsibility to help everyone. We literally can't. We can't force someone to care for themselves in the future. And we can't make the choices someone has to be willing to make for themselves. Which is why not every burden is your purpose or responsibility. Sometimes a burden only feels meaningful because it distracts you from the life you're responsible for building. And this is where Yuji becomes such a powerful mirror. Yuji's burden starts with wanting to help people. He wants to give people proper deaths. Then it becomes a guilt he carries for the deaths he couldn't prevent. Then after the Shibuya event, it becomes self-punishment that transforms his purpose into a burden. Yuji's purpose began as compassion, but after enough traumatic events, it became a debt that he believed he had to pay with himself. But this is where you can make a different choice than Yuji. You don't have to face your experiences alone. You don't have to sacrifice yourself for the greater good. You can choose a life of passion that fuels you more than it drains you. The distinction I want to make clear here is that purpose should give your life direction, but a burden slowly convinces you that your life only matters when you're carrying it. And that's not something you have to carry anymore. So my question for you now is, are you carrying all of this heaviness because it's truly yours, or because letting it go would force you to fully choose yourself?
Don't just pretend it didn't happen. It's because of me that so many are dead now!
Because of us!
What I want to drive home is that Yuji having a good heart isn't wrong. His compassion isn't wrong. But his story shows what can happen when someone believes that their life is only valuable when they're carrying the burdens of others. And I can attest to that because that's something I've carried with me for years. I wanted to save people. I wanted to give my all so they could thrive, but I had to learn to become the person I needed for myself. I had to own up to my visions and take responsibility for my future. Now that doesn't mean I stopped caring. I simply stopped being responsible for everyone else's life. I learned to notice whether the relationships I was pouring into had reciprocity and respect. I learned that guilt doesn't always mean you did something wrong. That sometimes it just means you're no longer abandoning yourself. And I learned that in some chapters of life, you need you more than the world needs you. Your heart is not the problem. Your love is not the problem. Your desire to help others is not the problem. The problem is believing those things only matter if they cost you everything. The problem is that your suffering is proof that your love is real. Yuji doesn't need to show less of his heart. He needs to remember he is more than what he can endure. Imagine helping people without betraying yourself. Imagine relationships where your love is honored, not exploited. You can care deeply and still choose yourself. You can love people and still have boundaries. You can have purpose without making yourself the sacrifice. And although that may be something Yuji is still trying to discover for himself, maybe for you that is the door you're ready to walk through.